I flew home for the holidays thinking I'd walk into laughter, lights, and the usual chaos of my big family. Instead, the driveway was empty. The porch light was off. The curtains were shut tight, like no one had touched them in days. It was already weird before I even got the door open. Inside, the air was cold, the kind of cold that only sets in when a house has been left alone too long. The living room was dark, except for the TV glow bouncing off the walls from the kitchen. And that's where I found him, my grandpa, sitting at the table, chewing through a dry sandwich with a cup of water beside him. No holiday dinner, no decorations, no family, just him. I thought maybe they were running late or had gone out for groceries. But then I saw the note. It was stuck on the fridge, scribbled in a hurry. My jaw clenched reading it. They'd taken my holiday money I'd sent weeks earlier to help with food and gifts, and spent it on a last-minute trip to Disney. They left my 84-year-old grandfather behind without even checking if I was coming home. No one texted. No heads up. They assumed I'd arrive, see him there, and just take over, babysit an old man they didn't even have the decency to feed properly. He didn't say much at first, just nodded when I asked if he was okay. Then he leaned in real quiet and told me something I won't repeat just yet. But I knew right then things were about to flip. I didn't get mad. Not the way they expected. I just made sure Grandpa had a hot meal, turned the heat back on, and set up his room with clean sheets and extra pillows. Over the next 3 days, I went through the house, checking bank statements, Wi-Fi history, the cameras I'd quietly installed when I visited last spring. There was a lot they didn't know I'd planned for, a lot they didn't expect me to find. Then, just as we were finishing lunch on the third day, there was pounding at the door, panicked voices. My brother, my sister-in-law, my cousin, all of them shouting over each other. They had no idea what they'd walked into. The pounding on the door was constant. My brother's voice cut through it all, louder than the rest, but shaky, like he wasn't sure if he was angry or scared. I let them knock for a minute, let them feel it. Then I opened the door. They looked rough, sunburnt, sweaty, bags under their eyes, and not a trace of that Disney magic they ditched Grandpa for. My sister-in-law was the first to step forward, probably expecting a hug or some emotional outburst. She started talking fast, saying it wasn't what it looked like, that there was a miscommunication, that they didn't know I'd actually show up. I didn't say much, just moved aside so they could see him. Grandpa was sitting on the couch, clean, warm, eating a bowl of stew like a king. He didn't even look at them, just kept eating, eyes on the TV. The silence between them hit harder than anything I could have said. That's when my cousin started crying. She said their flights were a nightmare, that their hotel room got cancelled last minute, that they used my money thinking it was a gift to help the kids. They spun every excuse they could. No one mentioned the note. No one asked if Grandpa was okay until 5 minutes in. My brother finally blurted it out. They needed help. Something went wrong with their bank accounts. Cards weren't working. They were locked out of the travel app. They booked the trip using my money and some of their own. But now their rent was due. Their fridge was empty. And they needed a place to stay while they sorted it all out. I listened. Let them spill every problem, every misunderstanding, every excuse. Then I told them the cameras in the house had been running since March. Every visit they made. Every time they left Grandpa with cold leftovers while they ordered takeout in the car. Every time they raided his medicine drawer looking for painkillers, I had it all. Video, audio, screenshots of their group chats they never knew were synced to the kitchen tablet. The panic hit full force then. They weren't just asking for a place to crash. They were trying to avoid consequences because something told me this wasn't just a bad vacation. And I was right. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. My cousin had stopped crying. My sister-in-law was pacing like a trapped animal. My brother sat slumped on the edge of the recliner, sweat on his forehead, jaw locked. Meanwhile, Grandpa was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm you only see in people who've already made their peace and chosen a side. After they finally stopped spinning their sob stories, Grandpa stood up, didn't say a word, just walked slowly down the hall toward the basement door and motioned for me to follow. I didn't ask questions. I just went. The basement was cold. The air smelled like old wood and motor oil. Grandpa shuffled over to the far wall, reached behind a row of dusty toolboxes, and pulled out a dented green tin box. He set it on the workbench and nodded for me to open it. Inside were papers, dozens of them, bank records, old checks, letters, and a typed-out timeline that spanned nearly a decade. I didn't get it at first until I saw the pattern, the withdrawals, the forgeries, the loans taken out in Grandpa's name. They'd been bleeding him dry for years, using his social security number to open credit cards, getting payday loans on his behalf, and never paying them off. One document showed my brother signed as a cosigner for a reverse mortgage that Grandpa never agreed to. The notary signature was fake, done by a friend of my cousin's who worked at a UPS store. And the worst part? Grandpa knew he'd been tracking it all in silence, waiting. He said they told him if he said anything, they'd put him in a home, strip the house, sell everything, and cut him off from the grandkids. And for a while, he believed them, until I started sending money last year. He used it to pay for an attorney. Not a flashy one, just someone smart and quiet who helped him gather everything legally. Every month, he built his case piece by piece, waiting for a moment like this. Back upstairs, they had no idea what I was holding. I took the tin box, set it on the coffee table in front of them, and opened it slowly. Their faces changed the second they saw what was inside. My brother went pale. My sister-in-law sat down without a word. My cousin started mumbling something about not remembering any of it. Grandpa didn't look at them. He looked at me and nodded once. This wasn't about revenge. It was about making things right. They sat there frozen while I flipped through the paperwork in front of them. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't have to. Every page I laid down was another nail in the coffin. Their signatures, their fake business receipts, the credit card applications with Grandpa's name but my brother's email, all of it. I wasn't looking for an explanation. I already knew there wasn't a good one. What I was waiting for was silence. The kind of silence that only happens when someone realizes they're cornered. It came quick. My sister-in-law stopped pacing. My cousin had her head in her hands. My brother was staring at the floor like it might open up and swallow him whole. Then I stood up and handed Grandpa his phone. He called his attorney without hesitation, set up a meeting for the following day, and told him the box was out and the files were ready. That's when panic turned to begging. They swore they'd pay it back. Swore it was never supposed to get this far. Claimed it was just supposed to be short-term help, a temporary fix while they got on their feet. But there was nothing short-term about draining an old man's savings and turning his identity into their personal ATM. They wanted to stay in the house. Just a few days, they said, till they figured out what to do. I told them that wouldn't be happening. Not after what they did. Not after they left him alone during the holidays with nothing but a sandwich and a scribbled note. They acted like I was being cruel, like they were entitled to something here. So, I made it easy. I pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to my brother. Inside was a notice, notarized, time-stamped, and legally sound. Grandpa had signed over temporary power of attorney to me 2 weeks earlier, just in case this trip home didn't go as planned. The house was off limits, the accounts frozen. The car they'd been borrowing was reported stolen that morning. The Wi-Fi they were leeching was disconnected. Even the storage unit they thought Grandpa forgot about was locked, with an inventory list already sent to his attorney. By the time they stepped outside, the locks were changed. My buddy had come by during the chaos and swapped every cylinder. They didn't even notice. Then Grandpa did something I didn't expect. He followed them out, stood on the porch with his arms crossed, watching them pack into the car they couldn't technically drive anymore. And when my brother turned to say something I'm sure was about guilt, family, or second chances, Grandpa just raised a hand. Didn't wave, just held it up like a stop sign. That was it. They drove off that night with nothing but a duffel bag and a shattered sense of control. I figured that would be it. Maybe a few angry texts, maybe some empty threats. I underestimated how far desperation can push people who feel entitled to everything. The next morning, the first message came through. A long paragraph from my cousin blaming me for tearing the family apart. She said, Grandpa didn't need lawyers or locks. He needed forgiveness. I ignored it. Then my brother sent one too, just a picture of the house taken from the sidewalk with no caption. He was still nearby. We called the attorney, sent over copies of the messages, flagged it all. Grandpa wasn't rattled, but I could tell he was on edge. He double-checked the doors that night. Slept in the living room with the remote in one hand and his walking stick across his lap. Around 3:30 a.m., I woke up to the sound of glass, not shattering, tapping. I got up fast, checked the cameras. One of the side feeds was down. Someone had cut the cable. I crept to the back window and pulled the curtain just enough to see movement by the shed. I didn't call the police right away. I called my friend, the same one who changed the locks. He was a security tech with a private patrol license, and he lived 2 blocks over. He was there in 6 minutes. By the time the patrol lights hit the driveway, my brother was already climbing over the fence. Caught in the act, red-handed, hoodie and gloves, carrying a crowbar in one hand and a gas can in the other. He said later he just wanted to scare us. Said he wasn't really going to burn anything, just make a statement. But it didn't matter because that moment, it wasn't a mistake. It was a felony. Police arrived, took statements, pulled footage from the backup camera he didn't see on the neighbor's shed. He was arrested without a fight. My sister-in-law didn't even bail him out. She called her mom and blamed the whole thing on stress and manipulation. Grandpa just sat at the kitchen table while it all went down. He didn't cry, didn't gloat, just nodded slowly like he'd been expecting this for years. I asked him if he was okay. He said he finally was. The court process moved faster than any of us expected. Between the footage, the financial documents, and the break-in, there wasn't much to argue. My brother's lawyer tried to paint him as desperate, overwhelmed, pushed too far by family pressure. But the judge didn't buy it. He was charged with attempted burglary, elder abuse, and identity theft. No slap on the wrist this time. My cousin and sister-in-law were called in for questioning next. Turns out Grandpa's lawyer had been quietly working with a state investigator. The moment the case went public, more victims came forward, mostly elderly, mostly relatives of people in their circle. They'd been running this play for years. When it all came crashing down, I asked Grandpa if he wanted to move, start fresh somewhere quieter. He shook his head. Said he built this house with his own hands and had no plans to die anywhere else. I respected that. A few weeks later, we were sitting on the porch. The neighborhood was calm again. No more strange cars parked up the street. No more anxiety every time someone knocked on the door. Grandpa handed me a thick envelope. Inside were property transfer papers, the house, the land, everything. He'd already filed them with the county. He said the house had almost been taken from him twice, once by the bank and once by his own blood. He wasn't going to let that happen again. I told him I didn't need it, that I was just glad he was safe. He nodded, but I could tell he'd already made up his mind. That house, he said, should belong to someone who showed up. It's been months since then. My brother's trial made the news. My cousin's avoiding charges by cooperating. My sister-in-law vanished into another state. None of them have reached out since. Good. Grandpa's doing better, healthier, stronger, and actually smiling again. I take him to his doctor appointments. We go out for coffee twice a week. Every now and then, he'll bring up what happened. Not with anger, just as a reminder of what people are capable of when they think no one's watching. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. And if you've made it this far, you know why I tell these stories. Because not everyone gets to walk away with the truth, the proof, and a second chance. We did. Subscribe if you haven't. There's more where this came from, and you never know when the next door knock will change everything.